Before we go to the cocktail session, let's invite and continue with our second session, the panel session titled Force Multipliers and Future Battlefields. And I would like to call on stage the moderator, Dr. Giorgos Dimitriou, who is the advisor to the Cyprus Ministry of Defense. A big round of applause, please. Hello again.
Thank you very much. I don't need the round of applause. I think it's our speakers that they are offering their wisdom today. I'm just doing a little bit the animation. So thank you very much again for the floor. While I will do some introductory remarks, I will take the liberty to invite the participants to the panel on the stage already. And I will start by the Honorable Ambassador Niziski. Please, if you can join me in the stage. Ms. Katerina Kavada, Ms. Despina Panagiotou Theodosiou, and Mr. Konstantinos Geroulis. Please join me on stage. Thank you very much. So, while my guests are taking their place, I would really, really invite you to pay attention to this panel. I think to take attention to this panel. And why? Not because I'm moderating, but because the topic is so catalytic and so critical, and it has just proven the fact that we have changed considerably the battlefield of the future. Let me remind you that in the case, in the new battlefield, most probably the new combat will not start with a missile. It will start with the disruption of communication. It will disrupt with the disruption of the networks. So we may have other things into consideration to take into to reflect. Let's not forget that according to a statement came from the EU, an hour before the Russia scale invasion started in 2022, we had the so-called cyber attack, which caused a major disruption into the networks. So there is a big change into what we see today, the theater of operations and the battlefield of the future. And in this way, I'm truly honored to have these four distinguished speakers with me that it will help us untangle a little bit the landscape. And if I may, having the protocol in mind, I will start from our ambassador and just ask you a little bit from what you are actually seeing is how has the security evolution been seen since 2022, since today in Ukraine, and in particularly focusing on the topic of the agenda, which is the hybrid warfare. So, and what has this brought into your toolbox of lessons learned and how it's evolving your daily operations, because unfortunately the war is still ongoing. So, Ambassador, thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished guests. Thank you for having me. Actually, you know, this Memorial Week for Ukraine, we are already in the 4 years of deep invasion situation in Ukraine, when every single day something happened in Ukraine. Terrible missiles attack every night in capital, and they destroyed electricity. And what is more important for people in this sphere, in military sphere, that they do not play in fair play. So there are no any rules of humanitarian law from their side, and this is actually the main problem, because if we're still thinking that it's conflict, as sometimes a lot of people use in their official meetings, it's not correct. It's war, aggression and invasion by Russia. This is the main point from which we need to start in general. Second, what I would like to say that the war started not in 2022. War started in 2014 when Crimea was annexed, and it actually was the big gap. And if we will try to combine the situation in Cyprus and Ukraine, that and the main lesson maybe for the both countries, that we need to care as a both country for our national equipment, We need care for our potential reserves, and do not do mistake what Ukraine done before in 19th, when we give permission to make a lot of export from Ukrainian famous military factory to another country and not care about security. And that's why the Budapest Memorandum 1994, it's actually the guarantee for an example for a lot of people why we need care about our security now, not tomorrow. So, and I think the main difference since 2022, as you asked me, and 2026, it's human capital. If you will see, if you saw the Ukrainian soldier until 2014 and Ukrainian soldier now in 2026, it's absolutely another people, another generation with another meanings and with another opportunity to fight and defend. And the main role, it was a lot of the training with NATO, EU, because since 2014, when Ukraine they ratify our agreement with EU, and to show everyone since Maidan unbreakable position of civilians in Ukraine, when millions people choose the EU way, shows actually that training is not something simple. Training is skills, what we need to prove every single day, because you never know when war can start. And the model, for example, of Switzerland, that a lot of people now talking about the Ukraine, that there are small army in Switzerland, but everyone ready to fight if something happens. Same in Ukraine now. And a lot of women also involved in this process. More than 5,000 women in the battle line, in the front line. More than 52,000 women in our military national army. So it's example that nobody talking about the women in general, that it should be and it must be, is the solution of the civilians. But let me back to again to your question about the future maybe battlefields. I think that in 2011-2012, I represent Ukraine in state service organization Ukroboronprom. It's Ukrainian Defense State Agency, who represent, and as you know, that Ukraine was in the top 3 export of weapon in the world. And but now, if you will review a lot of the factories what opened in Ukraine, in the European Union, just today, my colleague, Ambassador Zaluzhny announced, the General Zaluzhny announced in London, opened the big factory for Ukrainian military. Rheinmetall, big company in Germany, opened the affiliate office in Ukraine. So if you're talking about the invest in military in Ukraine now, it's exactly correct time. If we're talking about the defense of your country, it's also, we should to talk about this now and concentrate our power to develop, research and develop the native nationals factories. And of course the European Union is the answer for the both of us, what kind of the security map and metrics we want to see tomorrow. In strategy of Ukraine, the security and defense is priority, as you know, but human capital also. And the difference between Russia and Ukraine, that they thought that it's human resource. We have no resource, we have capital. And this is the main difference between our countries in general, because we care about each other. So I think this is the main messages what I can answer for your first question.
Thank you very much. I want to emphasize a little bit on the part of the hybrid warfare, and perhaps, Ms. Kavada, I would like to ask you, From the European perspective, how have you seen the hybrid warfare been evolving in the space domain and in terms of scope, in terms of frequency, and why is resilience becoming more important? I mean, we have seen space-related interventions also in Ukraine, US interventions and others. So what's the view from the EU point of view on what we have been seeing? Sorry.
Thank you very much, and good morning once again. I would like to start by giving congratulations to you and to the organizer in order to introduce the space in the defense field. Everybody considers that the space is really very civilian. However, and I think this is obviously demonstrated by the Ukrainian situation, that if we want to go ahead with a modern warfare, then the space should be present in terms of navigation, timing and positioning, in terms of observation, and in terms of communication. Nobody could imagine to go ahead and have a superiority in terms that they will decide and in terms that they will act if they don't have particular defense services. Not ideas, not prototypes, but real services. And then, coming back to the hybrid warfare, it's not new for space. Before even think about the design of a system, we have to run a threat analysis, a risk analysis, including the hybrid threats, in order to build the system in a way that they can resist. So the new, in the last, I think, 5 years, and in particular with the Ukrainian situation, is that the diversity and, if I have to use, I think your word is the scope and the frequency. 5 or 10 years ago, we had one every 6 months, a cyber attack. Now I think that we have one every day or even more. So it became our new normal, it became our daily operational routine. And this is very obvious because space is relevant to defense, therefore all the space actors, they will become target for cyber, for interference, for supply chain vulnerabilities and even physical attacks. What we have to do, because nobody could imagine to lose the GNSS, nobody can go ahead without observation or communication systems, to work on the defense of space. Everybody has in his mind the space for defense. This is the motto, space as an enabler. But if we don't work on the defense of space and how we can protect our infrastructures and the services that we provide, then it's a matter of time to be obsolete and not used for defense purposes. The good news is that all our systems are war-ready. And this is very important if you want to use the Galileo PRS, if you want to use the GOVSATCOM, if you want to use IRIS² in some years. The less good news is that we have to be active on a daily basis and we don't have a lot of time. 10 years ago, to go from one generation to another, it could be a matter of hard reflection and then capability, manufacturing, what was also mentioned in your previous panel. Now, and this is a great lesson learned coming from Ukraine, we don't have time. We need to act with agility and with adaptability. This is what we have learned from our friends in Ukraine. They need to have the product the day after and not in 10 years from now. And this is a great lesson learned in the way that we work. We consider that we have to reinforce our technologies. We need to reinforce our services, and definitely we need to reinforce the way that we cooperate. There is no even a second to think that Europe should go ahead in the space field on a fragmented way. The difference in culture between space and defense is that so far, as European Union, we have pan-European systems made for 27 member states by 27 member states. Once we are turning to the defense, we see each member state asking to get their sovereignty throughout their own systems. And we have to continue working, and we have to be interoperable even with the national capabilities. We don't have a lot, so we need really to federate and work with a license and interoperability. And let me conclude that if we want to go ahead with a space superiority, I will also add, and I will also underline what was said by His Excellence, skills. It's not the machine alone who will make it. It's not the machine alone who will produce it. It's not the machine alone who will operate. So we need skilled workforces, and from the day one and up to the end. So we need to attack the hybrid threats because it's our reality, and we have to make it with skilled people.
That was very interesting. Thank you very much. And I hope when we talk about claiming national sovereignty for the space-related, we're talking about integrative systems of systems and not fragmentation. Okay, great. That's good. While I'm moving on to the next speaker, I would like you to reflect a little bit on one thing, because there are many lessons learned that are coming from the Ukraine example, and I will come back to them, Ambassador. I would really be curious at all levels, even at the levels of skills, how the EU is incorporating these lessons learned, which, respectfully, Ambassador, nobody wished, although this happens, but these are the most tangible lessons learned because they are actual, they are not fictitious, they are not imaginatory. It's not a tabletop exercise, it's a reality. So how this reality comes into the EU planning at all levels, I'll come back to you. But there is a more triggered question, which I will come to Mr. Geroulis, about the contested space environment and in the context of modern hybrid warfare. What does that mean? What are the examples we get from the Ukrainian conflict, and how this illustrates the possible vulnerability of the satellite services today? So I was very curious about that, and thank you for taking up this question.
Thank you, George. It's important to set a definition about the contested space environment, because most of the people are sometimes confused, even the congested space environment. So it's good to set a definition. A contested space environment, in simple words, it's an environment where the space systems or the services that they deliver, because it's not always the space system, is actively targeted, threatened, mitigated, or manipulated. So our role as operators is to minimize and to eliminate, if possible, this vulnerability. So I will stick to what you said, the vulnerability, because a fundamental equation in crisis and risk management is that risk is hazard times vulnerability divided by capacity. So on a national level and European level, first of all, we have to increase our capacity. And the President this morning highlighted in his speech that we must increase our resilience. And then Mrs. Cavada mentioned about diversity, because resilience is coming from diversity. This is what we learned from Ukraine as well. He said, the President mentioned also to be competitive and to be innovative. So competitive, it's not, from commercial perspective that I'm coming. I suppose, and I'm pretty sure that the President mentioned to be competitive in terms of autonomy, infrastructure, etc. And I will come, at the end on the lessons, because all of these at the end are related. The innovation, we saw signing of the optical laser communication on Elasat 5, and I will come to this as well in your next question. And then Mr. Hadjipavlis mentioned that defense is not war, defense is peace, and I would like to highlight that Greece is suffering every year from fires, floods, and immigrants. So this is the real war that we are facing now. Coming into the lessons of Ukraine. The first lesson is the loss of strategic surprise. So the use of commercial Earth observation satellites provided imagery, and we saw the preparation of the Russians even months before the invasion. So a key objective, of a from military perspective was lost, because the Russians thought that the Ukrainians did not have eyes to see, but we see for first time the commercial use of Earth observation satellites giving picture, to all of us. Secondly, a few hours before the invasion, as you mentioned, we saw one of the hybrid threats being applied, which is the KA-SAT activation of terminals, not only Ukraine, but in full Europe. And this makes us think that we should consider space as an end-to-end system. Because in this case, the disruption came on the modem, on the last part of an end-to-end system. So the satellites remained attached, but we saw on the firmware of the modem a cyber attack, which caused a lot of damage and a lot of interruption to the Ukrainian forces in terms of coordination, logistics. It's not only the defense part. However, we saw the fast deployment of Starlink in Ukraine, and this is a fact as well. And then we saw another lesson, the GNSS denial, jamming, spoofing, which came along with cyber attacks. And there, Ukraine was also very innovative. They were using the imagery taken from commercial satellites in order to use visual navigation. So the war sometimes gives, very innovative solutions that you can never think of. So I would say that we have to stick on some sovereignty is important, of course. Diversity is important because it creates resilience. Redundancy comes together with diversity. And we should focus on an integrated approach on space, both with commercial, national assets, and European, of course, assets such as GOVSATCOM and IRIS².
Before I move to Despina, just hold that thought 1 second, because one of the bigger prides I see in technological advancements to systems, yes, we see material, et cetera, but we see a lot of pride in how these systems are connected, self-navigated, et cetera, in order to achieve precision, recognition, and many other things. So, and perhaps this is coming to you, the resilience factor is becoming critical in this equation. We talk about resilience quite a bit, policy language, but being in an industry, how do you translate that? How does that operationalize in the context? Because I'm pretty much worried. I know maybe it's not one-to-one, but a few months ago when we had the attacks in Lebanon, etc., we have experienced here in Cyprus the jamming of the GPS, and then you were trying to go Google and you appear to be in Lebanon, or you appear to be, because of very specific reasons. So I think that we have to start, collecting that information in order to be able to get the right lessons, especially at the policy level, which are more globally in terms of Europe, decisive in the way forward. But what's your thought on that, Despina?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Tototheo Global might be the lesser-known company here, so I'll just say we're Cyprus-owned, Cyprus-headquartered satellite and communication and technology company with global operations. And we mainly operate in the maritime enterprise government domains, and we manage currently around 8,000 connections.
I will start where you stopped. The lines are blurred now between what is commercial and what is military or governmental. And this has been very interesting for us in the industry to see, especially in the last few years. You asked about resilience. I would say that real resilience is not about avoiding disruption, but it's making sure that we can sustain mission outcomes through constant disruption. That's very important in a contested environment. Of course, you must assume jamming and spoofing and interruptions to supply chain or compromise of the supply chain. And often that's simultaneously and often without a clear attribution to it. So the real question is not if we can prevent this disruption, but if we can continue operating when disruption is constant. Operationally, resilience must cover the entire service chain. So we start with the space segment, the ground segment, the terminals, the networks, people, and procedures are very important as well. And adversaries, they do not attack a satellite. What they attack is the weakest link in the end-to-end service. When it comes to the operation side of it, it has been mentioned a few times already. Architectural redundancy, it's extremely important, but also diversity as well. Redundancy gives you the backup, but diversity ensures that the backup does not fail for the same reason. So that's very important. If all terminals use the same firmware and the same frequency band and same routing path, then a tailored jamming or unexploited can cascade through the entire system. So it's important for us to deliberately break that symmetry and make it more difficult for the attacks to happen. I would say integrated RF and cyber monitoring, because the signal layer right now and the software layer are no longer separable. So it's important to have teams that are integrated and they can monitor and shorten the detection to response cycles. This is very commercial actually, but pre-negotiated search and reconfiguration. If something happens and you need to activate resilience at 3 o'clock in the morning and you need to go through technical and legal issues, then it becomes a real problem. So I think that's where we need pre-agreed activation mechanisms between governments and commercial operations, so resilience is actually executable immediately and not theoretical. And I would also say test and exercise in a realistic environment. If it's a tabletop exercise, it's not enough because that tests only the plan. What we need to test is, have drills, people be in the real situation and make sure that they can respond if something similar happens. It's not just about the plan, it's how you respond to the plan.
Remember, we want peace, not war.
That's true, but we need to be ready for all scenarios. The issue, it's very interesting when you say that, but you either discover your weaknesses in peacetime or when you're under fire, and I don't think you want the second. Resilience, to conclude, it's engineered into the architecture, it's embedded into the contracts, integrated across domains, and it's rehearsed under stress. It's not an interrupted service. If that's what we want, I think that's nearly impossible, but it's the ability to fight through that disruption and sustain your mission outcomes anyway.
Thank you. It's very clear from me after your intervention, we're embracing disruption one way or another in order to be able to accommodate it in an effective way. It's not an easy thing to do, by the way, but coming to that, before I pass back to the ambassador, Costa would like to give you literally 30 seconds to explain to me a little bit. We've seen today the signature of the agreement in the presence of the president. So what kind of added value such agreements can bring into this anchoring of sovereignty between regions like Cyprus and Greece within the context of space? What does that mean exactly?
Okay, thank you for this question. First of all, it's all about the governance, because Hellasat, as a Greek and Cypriot satellite operator, we must guarantee who is having the control, because we say about sovereignty, we didn't analyze it a lot. One of the key lessons was who is having the switch at the end, and even if we have a resilient system, who is controlling it, because this is very important as well. The signing of this agreement today is adding to our resilience an extra layer of security, of better performed service to an existing fleet at 39 degrees east, which is the orbital position of Greece and Cyprus, to have Hellasat 5, together with Hellasat 3 and Hellasat 4, the two existing satellites, that already provide services to governmental and defense customers. Together with the space, we have two fully owned teleports in Greece and Cyprus, one in Athens and one in Kofinu here in Cyprus, where we support all our activities for delivering end-to-end services, but most importantly, we have the two satellite control centers. So maybe something that people don't know is that in the case of Hellasat, the control of the satellites, the switch and everything is controlled by Greek and Cypriot engineers. And this is mandatory by the Greek law that we have as Hellasat for our operations. The network operation center is in Greece and Cyprus, so this gives Greece a first step of assurance in the services that we provide. Secondly, Greece is one of the resource providers of GOVSATCOM initiative of GOVSATCOM program, one of the 5. So, in a European level, we have one of the 5 countries, which is Greece, which is providing resources to this pooling and sharing program of the European Union. And if we compare now the services that we mentioned, GOVSATCOM is very clear that it's a resilient service. Why? Because we talked about diversity. Since 8 satellites are in this pooling and sharing platform, for sure it's diversity, since we have 8 at least orbital positions. So it is resilient, it is redundant, and with the addition of IRIS², this makes it even more resilient, and it's, the #1, I would say, project that we have in space, considering that we have GEO on GOVSATCOM, then we have MEO, LEO, so we have a good force in our hands. So in European level, I believe in sovereignty. I believe that every country should have a piece of sovereignty in infrastructure and in space. However, if we want to analyze resilience, it's obvious that even if you have a sovereign satellite, this is not resilience. Because if something happens to this satellite, you are alone. So a combination of both is the right approach in space. And adding commercial services, I'm also, confident that commercial service should be used as a total.
Thank you very much, Costa. Ambassador, you spoke about skills, you spoke about human capital, but allow me an external, naive even thought. When a number of things were happening in Ukraine, we have seen a lot of innovation management from your people. We have seen, which I called it a forced one, People, when they're in a difficult situation, they innovate. I even see it with my 7-year-old daughter, how she innovates if I put her into the corner. So the point here is that we are talking a little bit more upscaling, because all these, let's say, space assets and all this kind of impact and disruption that may have into the operations definitely bring an niche lessons learned from all of us. And you have been the one to see it in action, in practice. We wish you hadn't, but you did. So let's say, which could be those 2 or 3 ones that you would say are the most memorable in your view?
Sure. Well, before I'm leaving, because we have the another meeting in Philoxenia, you know, today is the big meeting with health and rehabilitation,
Yes.
what actually very important for our soldiers topic. Well, I can speak a lot about these innovation topics because in Ukraine, more than 300 only drone factories registered in Ukraine. It's locals.
Yeah.
And the main answer, again, we're back to the skills and education. So, in my opinion, every European country and in general, all countries should invest in education and in soft skills. Because, for example, the NATO, everyone knows that NATO also invested in education, in English speaking, in practice. But I'm sure that if everyone will hear these sounds, what Ukrainians heard last 4 years, believe me, you never know how your body will react for this in your mind. So the skills, practice, use and involve civilians for another modern opportunities like IT sphere, space, engineering, people who involve in other IT systems, they can be your amazing arms. And the answer, and this video, what you can see in a lot of TikToks and in social media, it's real video. When Ukrainians from, I don't know, the very famous story when on the second week of the war, post officer of Ukrainian post office guy took an law and destroyed the F-16.
Yeah.
Who knows him? He said, because I'm finished the Kyiv Polytechnical Institute. Who knows how it's switched on? He knows. Another guy who actually came to army and was the simple IT specialist said, how you can quickly to understand how this drone is working? Because skills. And this is answer that Starlink tomorrow cannot work and space can close. But your skills will be with you every time until you're the finish and the end of your life. That's why I continue to confirm that skills is very important. But of course that innovations, a lot of the drone factories, a lot of the IT solutions, and I know that Ukrainians choose Cyprus exactly for the IT solutions and cyber security system, because a lot of the cyber security attachment, what, for example, United States announced that a lot of Ukrainians do this, not in Silicon Valley, but also in the Cyprus. And I think we need to grow this. No. IT sector, space, totally agree, because now they're fighting for the space. And everyone knows that the space will be the second lever and already started, I think, for the fighting. But again, I think that everyone should think about their neighbors also and their who with you sitting, drinking, and I don't know, with general. Because sometimes when Ukraine sign memorandum with simple things with Russia that rent Crimea seaports until 2052, it was cabal agreement for Ukraine. Who knows that one of the garant of Budapest memorandum will do something like we have. So that's why Ukrainians, when we're talking about the trust, absolutely thinking another about the trust.
Yeah.
And any memorandums is good, but the practice and believe in your skills, number one. And again, repeat, invest in the people, invest in the soft skills, invest in the education, engineer education, growing and exchanging. Because when people arrange exchanging program, as for example, National Guard Ukraine and National Guard Cyprus, exchange information, exchange friends, relations, believe me, it's give more results sometimes than some memorandum or something else. Thank you. And
thank you very much. Thank you.
To go. Thank you.
While we're past our time, I want to give you 2 minutes, Mrs. Kavala. I know it's a little, but I want to get that helicopter view on how this is infused within the EU policy. All these lessons learned, all these technological concerns, resilience, autonomy, space assets. You mentioned a few of them already, but how do they come back and they fit the policy? And what do we do about that?
I will be very direct, because from time to time we have to say truths.
Okay.
The very first, and it will remain always in the history of space and defense, lessons learned coming from Ukraine, is to demonstrate that the big taboo that we had in Europe for decades have been left aside. I've started working in space back to 90s, and I remember that until 2020, it was almost a taboo to say that space is made for defense too.
Oh my God.
I have to be really direct and very frank with all of you. We used to find some use cases in order to demonstrate that we are building civil systems under civil control and with some defense applications. And then, after the Russian invasion in Russia, everybody said it openly and loudly that it will always be civil systems, they will always remain under civil control, but yes, they are made for defense and they are made for war. And I know what you will tell me, that we don't like the war, nobody likes it, but the reality is that we are in the middle of the war, in Europe, not somewhere else.
Yeah.
So this taboo, the break of the taboo, is very important. The second taboo was the fear, and I know that I will run out of time, but give me some minutes. The second taboo, and I'm afraid that this is always from a political point of view on the stage, that either space will be militarized or defense will be civilized, okay? So we need to pay attention that we can work on a synergistic approach, both fields, defense and space and defense, and synergies does not mean osmosis. Both we will keep our ID and both we will work together. So let's go ahead with synergistic approach, and this is what we're trying to promote in the European Union, and avoid the osmosis. They will not bring an added value to each sector. Second message, very important, how we deal with the vulnerabilities, because we will become more and more targets. And what we have to do in order to help all our users, in particular the defense, how we can have a better PRS for Galileo without resisting on jamming and spoofing, with greater features, and we're there. What we have to do with the new service of Earth observation, the governmental service, in order to have a better revisiting and a better tasking approach. And definitely, how fast we can provide the European Union with connectivity, secure connectivity under IRIS². And above these three assets, even more important, with the SST, SSA, SDA, as we are in the defense sector, how we will push the defense of the space and the space superiority. Because space, as you rightly said, the war in Ukraine started from the space with the cyber attack in Vizet. It continues, and we hope that in space it will be ended because we will have space superiority. Third message, we don't have to consider that space is only limited to governmental assets. Private sector is present, and we can take advantage. We can join the governmental with the commercial in order to have a better management, more products, return to investment, and a better financial management. So we have to open our eyes and our pockets as well, and cooperate with the private sector. And we see that we have really a great transformation of the private sector because they work for the public. So they hear the needs and they build the system in order to reply to these needs. And the very last one is we don't have to be dependent to third countries or multi-billionaires, that they can switch on, switch off whenever they want the system, and our strategic autonomy, our resilience, it can fly overnight. Just for the history, the day that I went to the council in order to present the IRIS² and get the mandate, although my team prepared 50 slides presentation, I decided to go with one slide and 3 beautiful photos. It was 2 days after the invasion. The first photo, it was the attack of Viasat, and I said, we are vulnerable.
Yeah.
The second photo was the attack of the telecommunication network in Ukraine, and I said, we need satellites because the ground, it will be the very first target. And my third picture was the Twitter by that time, X now, of President Zelensky to Elon Musk saying, thank you, Elon. So I said, if we are vulnerable, if we need space, and if we don't want our governance to say thank you to a billionaire, let's go ahead with our own sovereign pan-European infrastructure.
It
Thank
couldn't
you.
close better. Give her a round of applause. Give everybody a round of applause. Thank you very much to all 3 guests, and apologies for again being late.